It was the year 304 AD, deep in the winter months, when the Roman Empire stood at the height of its power yet at the edge of its fears. In the Roman city of Emerita Augusta, today's Mérida in Spain, a drama was about to unfold that would resonate for centuries. Emerita was no mere provincial settlement. Founded by Emperor Augustus as a colony for veterans of his legions, the city bore all the hallmarks of Rome's grandeur. Marble-paved streets stretched in perfect order, aqueducts carried clean water, amphitheaters hosted gladiators and plays, and temples to Jupiter and Mars stood proud in the Forum. Citizens strolled through bustling marketplaces where merchants sold olive oil, wine, and fabrics brought from across the empire. Yet beneath this polished veneer, something restless stirred. Christianity, still a relatively young faith, was spreading through Iberia. In private houses, by candlelight, believers whispered prayers to a single God, refusing to bow before the multitude of Roman deities. To the authorities, this was not just superstition, it was rebellion, treason against the gods that had carried Rome to greatness. The Emperor Diocletian, determined to restore Rome's old religious unity, issued harsh edicts. Churches were destroyed, sacred texts burned, and Christians stripped of rights. Those who resisted were tortured or killed. It was in this world that a child would stand against an empire. Her name was Eulalia, only 13 years old, yet destined to become one of the most famous martyrs of Spain. She was not a leader, not a philosopher, not a soldier. She was, by every worldly measure, powerless. But in her faith, she wielded a weapon stronger than swords and legions. On a cold December morning, her small footsteps echoed through the marble corridors of justice, where countless criminals had once been judged. But unlike them, she did not walk in chains, she walked willingly, unafraid, ready to face the fury of Rome. To understand why this child's courage mattered, we must step back into the wider age of persecution. In 303 AD, Emperor Diocletian, persuaded by his co-emperor Galerius, launched what would become the most severe and systematic attempt to extinguish Christianity the empire had ever seen. Known as the Great Persecution, it spread from the heart of Rome to the farthest provinces. The first edict ordered that all Christian churches be demolished and scriptures burned. A second stripped Christians of the right to hold office or appeal to courts. A third demanded that clergy be imprisoned. Finally, the fourth edict, by far the harshest, required every citizen, regardless of rank or age, to sacrifice to the Roman gods or face death. In some cities, compliance came easily. People feared for their lives, and with a pinch of incense at a pagan altar, they secured safety. But in other places, resistance grew. And in Emerita Augusta, resistance had a name, Eulalia. For a girl of 13 to even appear in a Roman tribunal was shocking. Children were supposed to be silent, obedient, submissive. Yet she carried herself with the conviction of someone far beyond her years. Her defiance was not childish stubbornness, it was a profound declaration that even a child could see through the empty pomp of Roman idols. When Eulalia was brought before the governor of Lusitania, the room was filled with onlookers. Some were curious, some mocking, others uneasy. The sight of such youth in the place of judgment unsettled even hardened soldiers. The governor, seated in authority, eyed her with both irritation and fascination. He was used to cowards, to frightened peasants begging for mercy. But here stood a girl with eyes clear and unafraid. "Child," he began, his tone soft at first, almost paternal. "You are young. You do not understand the weight of your defiance. Offer just a grain of incense to the divine Caesar. Speak the words. It is nothing. Do this, and you may go home to your family." But Eulalia shook her head. "I have a father greater than Caesar. I have a Lord greater than your gods. I will not deny him." The governor's voice hardened. "Do you not see these men? These guards, these instruments of pain? Do you think your God will save you when the whips strike? When the fire touches your flesh? Do you not value your life?" Her answer rang through the chamber. "My life is not mine to keep. It belongs to Christ. Do what you will. My body is dust, but my soul you cannot touch." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some were astonished, others angered, but none could deny the force of her words. The governor's face darkened. "Very well," he declared. "If you will not worship our gods, then you shall be offered to them in blood." The punishments began at once. Guards seized her, stripping her of her garments, leaving her exposed before the crowd. The winter wind cut through her, but she stood firm, her eyes lifted upward. Whips cracked across her skin, each strike tearing fresh wounds. Iron claws raked her body, ripping away flesh with every stroke. Torches were pressed against her sides, searing her young frame. The crowd recoiled at the sight. Some jeered, calling her stubborn. Others turned away in pity, unable to watch a child endure such torment. Through it all, Eulalia cried out, not in pleas for mercy, but in defiance. "Your idols are nothing. They cannot speak, they cannot hear, they cannot save. Only Christ is Lord, and He gives me strength." Her words stung the magistrates more than any blade. Instead of silence, her pain gave birth to proclamations of faith. Instead of fear, she inspired awe. The governor, desperate to break her spirit, ordered her hair set aflame. The flames licked at her head and shoulders, the smell of burning flesh filling the air. Still, she did not recant. Even as her voice faltered, her spirit blazed brighter than the torches that consumed her. And then, as her body collapsed under the weight of torment, something extraordinary happened. From the clear winter sky, snow began to fall. A sudden storm, unheard of in the mild climate of Lusitania, swept over the city. White flakes drifted down, covering her broken body as though heaven itself had clothed her in a robe of purity. The crowd gasped. Soldiers hesitated. Even the governor shifted uneasily. Was this coincidence, or was it divine? At that moment, witnesses swore that a dove rose from Eulalia's mouth, ascending upward into the grey sky. To Christians, the meaning was undeniable: her soul had taken flight, free and triumphant, beyond the reach of Rome's cruelty. What Rome thought was victory had turned into spectacle, a miracle that transformed execution into testimony. Her lifeless body was left for display, as a warning to others. But the snow, relentless and gentle, covered her wounds, veiling her shame, restoring her dignity. Soon after, Christians gathered her remains and buried her in Mérida. Her tomb became a place of pilgrimage, a sanctuary where the faithful whispered prayers and sought courage. To the authorities, she was just one more execution. But to the growing Christian community, she was a martyr crowned, a witness whose death gave life to faith. In the decades that followed, her name spread across Hispania and beyond. She was remembered in sermons, hymns, and poems. The Christian poet Prudentius, writing in the late 4th century, immortalized her in his great work Peristephanon. His verses painted her not as a victim, but as a warrior of God, a bride of Christ who faced Rome with unshakable courage. Art, too, took up her story. In mosaics, frescoes, and later medieval manuscripts, she was shown with flames at her sides, snow descending upon her, and a dove rising from her lips. Churches were dedicated in her honor. Relics of her body were venerated. Pilgrims traveled to her shrine in Mérida, and later, parts of her relics were carried to Oviedo, where devotion to her flourished. Over centuries, her cult became one of Spain's most beloved. For Christians living under Visigothic kings, under Moorish rule, and in the later Reconquista, Saint Eulalia remained a figure of steadfastness, an innocent who triumphed over tyranny. What, then, does her story mean? It is brutal, tragic, and deeply unsettling. The thought of a child enduring such torment is difficult to bear. Yet history often shows us paradoxes, that sometimes the weakest are the strongest, and that the powerless change the world more than armies. Eulalia stood where no child should stand, before governors and executioners, stripped of protection, stripped of comfort. Yet she did not waver. Rome had its legions, its laws, its instruments of pain. She had only faith. And it was enough. 1700 years later, her name is still remembered. Her feast day is still celebrated. Her story is still told. The empire that condemned her is long gone, its marble temples crumbled to dust. But the memory of Eulalia endures, untouched, unbroken, eternal. In the end, her martyrdom was not about death, but about victory, the triumph of faith over fear, of innocence over cruelty, of eternal hope over the fleeting power of empires. And just as the snow once covered her broken body in purity, so too has history covered her name, not with shame or silence, but with honor everlasting.